Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. And the thought on my mind for just a couple minutes was the idea of really embracing eroticism. This has been so heavy on my mind. It hasn't been a huge part of my platform. There's been a little discussion about it, but the Harmonic Atheist channel has not talked about it anywhere near as much as it probably deserves to be talked about, and as much as it's going to be talked about down the line eventually with some very big projects that are definitely on the back burner at this point, but they're still important in my mind. But one of the things that I've been waiting to do for a while is to really push and even publish erotic stories. I've been working on them for quite a while. There's a different platform, not YouTube. Of course, YouTube wouldn't have them be hosted there. But there's a different platform that I'm working with. The approval process took far more time than I would have ever expected for something very simple. But I did get approved for a different platform for erotic stories, and it's basically going to be like, ASMR type stories, but with, all about the eroticism. I do have a YouTube channel that's romantic ASMR, which is, PG-13-ish, but I'll be having, the full freedom, it looks like, to share the erotic stories on this other platform. It's not my top priority by any stretch. I've got so many other big projects on my mind for the Harmonic Atheist channel and for other things that I'm doing that are far more important. So this is more like maybe I'll get to one or two this year. For sure, it'll be on my radar for next year. Hopefully by mid to end of next year, there'll be quite a few of them up. And I share that in part just to say that's just what I'm doing. I know some of you like to just kind of hear what projects and ideas are running through my head, and that's one of them. But I want to step back a little bit from the idea of what I'm doing and just to the topic of eroticism. So many of us have been deprived of the ability and the freedom to just think the thoughts that we want to think and to be who we really are. And it drives so many people into like a secret world, a closet, so as it were, a place where you've got your facade life, but then you've got your real life. And I hear a bunch of crazy things. There's a whole bunch of movements that have occurred that I'm going to be eventually getting involved in, kind of hopefully sending some opposite messages that try to de-emphasize sex and the sex drive and the importance of sex, especially for men. To people who would say it's not a need, it's a want. People who would say that men's sex drives need to be pretty much diminished, in my opinion, put into a far back seat to other parts of life. It's been one of the most crushing things to see the tendency, even of deconverted people, to go along with those bandwagons. I've even had extensive conversations with people who are pure atheists who absolutely would agree with some of those concepts. And men in many ways are being put down, and their sexuality is being relegated to a far less important place than it used to be. I understand why. It happened because men's sexuality took far too strong of a place in terms of authority and lack of accountability. But, the pendulum always swings way too far, doesn't it? And in that, we are truly as a culture setting up men to fail and to have two different lives. And if that's what people really want, have at it. I don't want that for my life, for our culture. There needs to be a blending of who you are and what you think with your actual reality. And if people want the facade just for the sake of, supposed different and in their minds, I guess, better culture, I think it's actually going to quite blow up in their faces, and they're going to have endless issues. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that we are much more erotic as a culture than we're willing to admit. And it's funny, we're so erotic in some ways. I remember as a Christian, it was always like sex is talked about way too much. It's just way too prevalent in our culture. I don't think the issue is that sex is talked about too much. In some ways, I think it's talked about far too less. I think it's how we talk about it. And so much of it, of course, is the shame issue, what you really think, what you really want, what you really desire, fantasies, that people are just shamed. And there's obviously people that kind of take a route where they just kind of strongly say, I don't know, I'm hyper into eroticism, and they kind of make that their platform. And, you see people, even people where their whole lives, their whole platform switches to almost like a nonstop, like that's all they talk about. There's other people where they get the good verbal beating from the culture, and especially from, their peers, and they get the sense that they need to kind of pull it together and just shut the hell up about their eroticism. And they end up very much burying a big, huge part of who they are, which to me is just tragic. But I'm not going to be intimidated. I don't take people's opinions too highly for the most part. I make my own journey. I make my own decisions. You have to be your own self. You have to think for yourself and come to conclusions that are different, even if your very peers, the people that you work with and respect and think we align on so much. We've deconstructed together, we've deconverted together, but on this part, we diverge strongly. I definitely think that there is a need for the topic of eroticism to be brought much more to the forefront of our thinking. I think for many of us, being able to embrace that erotic side of us is one of the most healing things possible. I mean, truly one of the most healing things possible. It takes all these thoughts and these desires and these drives, and it says, yes, some of these fantasies you can't ever have in real life, and that's okay. Like, nobody expects their fantasies to come in real life, but that doesn't mean you can't have an imagination. And that doesn't mean that your imagination is in some way shameful or bad. It really doesn't. And for those people who really want to diminish that part of life and say shame on people for indulging in fantasies so much, I just want to put it out there. For anyone that hears you and listens to you and takes heed of your pressure, understand they're still going to be that person. Your slap on the wrist or your trying to make them into something that they're not is not going to change who they are. They're just going to not be that way in front of you. They're going to have a double life. That's tragic. I saw it a lot in Bible college. I would talk, of course, with the guys in the dorm. And we're talking men who are, a year or 2 or 3 away from probably becoming full-time pastors and just drowning in their desires for the ability to see a woman's body and to touch it and to enjoy it and to be able to release on a regular basis and for it to be completely healthy and normal. But they had nothing but shame over it, nothing but shame, completely devastating their hearts and leading them I personally saw dozens of cases. I'm sure it's endless if you could really know the full extent, but all these cases of people living 2 different lives and their public life where they're trying to become a pastor, you just think, this, if they admit a 100th of what they're thinking, they're screwed. Like, they're royally screwed in terms of their career, their ability to keep their pastorate, their ability to be seen as a good person, as a good guy. And so, and obviously if they were lucky enough, so to speak, to get a spouse that just loved to be intimate, they might find a way to be like, okay, I'm getting my needs met here. But it isn't just about your actual physical needs. You emotionally, intellectually, psychologically need to be okay with the fact of who you are. It's taken me quite a while to get to that point, to say, who are you? What does eroticism mean to you? And are you okay fully embracing it? And, some of the stories that I'm writing, even those of you that are very, in tune with your sexuality, I think some of them would make you blush. They're real. They're me. They're part of my human journey. Doesn't mean I do almost any of them, but fantasy is different from reality, and fantasy is perfectly normal to indulge in my opinion. And it's, again, for me, been one of the most healthy things that I could have ever chosen to truly delight in this stuff. And I would just encourage you to think through that. Maybe you'll come to a different position than me, and that's fine. We don't have to agree. I get hate mail nonstop. I mean, I get 100 rude comments a day on my YouTube channel. I'm used to people saying, I don't think you're seeing it the right way. But for anyone who feels like that is barking up the right tree, so to speak, it is on the right wavelength, I encourage you. It doesn't mean you have to write erotic stories like I'm talking about or whatever, but enjoy thinking these thoughts. If there's things that truly just delight your body, and get to know your body first, get to know your own body with your own, just yourself alone. Know what pleases you and be able to slowly, learn what pleases your partner, but also communicate to your partner what pleases you, so that there's this mutual back and forth, and just a desire to say, I don't want to hide anymore what I really want. And maybe for some of you, I mean, that's a scary thought, because maybe if you shared what you really want, it would end up causing great distance in your relationship. So obviously take that slowly, and be very, very cautious. But if you sense that there's a safety zone there where someone's saying to you, and a good relationship, I think, would include this, to say, who are you really? If we're in a relationship, we're dating, or we're engaged, we're married, whatever, if you're my partner, and I want to know you, I don't want to know the facade you that looks clean or looks nice or looks polished. I want to know the real you and all your glory and stain. And however people would phrase that, like, I want to know the real you. And in terms of, the more, erotic and kinky side, I want to know what turns you on. I want to know what gets you going. I want to know what revs your engine up. And I may not be able to meet every last desire and dream and fantasy you've had. And I'm certainly not looking to make this into a Playboy mansion. But, in the intimacy of our private lives, we can enjoy each other a lot. And we can, focus on each other, escape your desires and focus on the other person, and vice versa, and then enjoy each other together. But that doesn't really happen if there's any level of shame in your heart. If you're thinking to yourself, I can't be me. I can't really tell. I can't show my cards. I've got to keep this like secret private part just to me. If you think your partner is in any way compelled to do that, you don't have a real relationship with that person. You have a relationship with the facade of that person. If there's a whole piece of them, whether it's intellectual, psychological, sexual, emotional, if there's a piece of them that they know that if they told you what they're really thinking, you would emotionally beat the tarnation out of them, I'm sorry, you don't have a relationship with them. You don't know them. It's not safe. I certainly hope you get there, but you have a relationship with the facade. And to me, that's a sad, sad, sad dynamic. And I know, speaking as a guy, I think most guys that I've come across in life absolutely feel this way. That if they said what they're really thinking, that the people in their lives would skin them alive emotionally for thinking that that's acceptable and healthy, to have fantasies and to just make eroticism such a big deal. To me, again, it's been one of the most healing things, and I encourage you to think through it, come to different conclusions if you do, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree. I am going to be creating a platform eventually to try to really dive into this. It's far down the line, even a year or two down the line. But, I'm collecting notes, and that's what I do. A lot of my projects, I collect notes for them and think about it for a while, so that when I finally get there, I've kind of thought through a lot of aspects of it. Part of that's time constraints. Part of it's just the balance of saying you don't address any topic quickly. Address it slowly. Listen for a while. Listen to your own heart. Listen to other people's hearts. Get some good advice on both sides of the equation. But I do want to get involved in this eventually. People are not thriving if they have to hide. And, when you bring things into the light, they do lose their power. When you bring things into the light, they lose their power because the secrecy that's pushing you to have two different worlds. Like, you need to integrate your two different worlds in some ways. And you need to have at least a safety zone with your truly most intimate person in your life to be who you are. And if that's not there long term, you do emotionally and psychologically kind of shrivel up. And of course, we all get used to it. We get used to the level of toxicity that so many people push toward us, and the level of control that they want, where we feel like we can't be ourselves, but we know that we'd rather have them accept the facade than them reject us utterly. That's just too scary. Being alone's too scary, what have you. And so we live in this intermediary zone where they kind of love us, but they kind of don't even know us. They kind of think we're awesome, but they don't even know who we really are. Man, that dynamic sucks. And it's part of, I'm sure, so many relationships, even though people don't know it. And again, I'm not speaking for ladies here. Guys, like gangbusters, live like that. They live with absolutely two different worlds. And even if you beg them, tell me what you're really thinking. Like, truly, you are safe with me. Tell me what you're really thinking. What are your erotic desires and fantasies? They're still thinking, that this is a game I will not play. I'm not going there. I'm not showing my cards. I'm not going to be me. And they live in that world, and it's horrible. They live their lives thinking, I can't show you who I really am. And who they really are is, there's nothing bad about it. They're normal human beings that have erotic desires, and they're beautiful and amazing. And perhaps some partners would say, if you told me that, if that's true of you, I'd actually love it. Like, I thought you were so boring. I thought you just were, plain Jane vanilla, whatever, intimacy. And I'm like, you're fun. But I didn't know that. And I didn't know you didn't know that you could be safe with me. But so many people, they even, again, no matter how hard you tell them, you're safe with me, tell me what you're thinking, damn straight, they will not tell you what they're thinking. That's just part of our human culture right now, part of our human nature. We have to, we have to stay away from that edge, the survival mode edge. We don't want relationships to be on edge because we're just so desperate for something. We'd rather have something than nothing. The nothing, the emptiness is just like, oh my gosh, I can't take that. I'll take breadcrumbs rather than starve to death. And on many levels, even beyond eroticism, we live in that gray area where it's like, this is kind of a good relationship, but it's kind of not even real. It's kind of, you're seeing a lot of me, but you kind of don't even know, the deepest part of me. And I'm never letting you in there because I've seen what other women do to their husbands. And if it was vice versa, if women feel the same way, women would, if they shared what they really are thinking, what their husbands would think and write them off emotionally, people they're terrified of being honest. And for what it's worth, I'm going to take that leap of faith, and I'm absolutely sure some people will be horrified. And that's okay. My content, again, I'm not putting up links at this point because there's nothing there, and there won't be anything for a while. But again, eventually, long term, it'll be something that I try to create, maybe like end of the second half of 2024, and maybe create one a month or something. But if people did at that point subscribe to it and see it, it's just audio. There's nothing visual. It's not like that. It's ASMR, but I mean, if you listen to it, it will definitely warm you up a little bit. But that's good though. I mean, it's so important to me to be able to say, this is you're a human, you're a hot-blooded human, and this is your one life. Embrace it to the nth degree as much as you can, without hurting anyone, without anything, any way that you are in any way causing harm. But if it is something that you both as a couple agree to, then have at it, enjoy it. And if it's got to start with your own mind, freeing your mind from the shackles of the shame and admitting who you really are and what you think about. Humans as a society, we're just not ready to be unplugged on so many of these levels. We're just not. We are truly not ready to be unplugged. We don't want to know what's really deep down, or just from a Christian perspective, we just think that's evidence that you're a grave sinner. That's the sinful part, whatever it is that pulls you back into that kind of old way of thinking. But if you're going to heal, if you're going to reground yourself, if you're going to become the best version of you, you have to start with a little honesty. Who are you? And if you can't be honest with yourself first, and then hopefully with your partner about who you are sexually, there's a part of you that's just going to kind of keep slowly dying inside. And you get used to it. I'm not saying you can't do it. We all get used to what we get used to. But if you want to thrive, I don't think there's anything wrong with the starting point of just you, at least in your own mind, in the quietness of your own heart, saying, let me be honest with who I am. Maybe someday I can carve out a way to a safe space to share who I am with other people, at least with my partner. Maybe you can't, and that's okay. Maybe you can't right now. But who knows? Maybe your partner's been waiting for you to be more erotic and playful. But at the very least, don't be ashamed of yourself. Don't be ashamed that you love to fantasize, that you love to think these thoughts. So many negative things that have come into our lives from Christianity. You have to pull these roots out. You have to. Pull them out, and begin to reground yourself and love who you are. But I do encourage you to do what you can. To just try to ground yourself and be as healthy as you can, as healed as you can, as free of shame. Make your own heart a shame-free zone. And see if you can branch out at some point with slowness and carefulness to your partner and try to share who you really are. And test the waters and see how it goes without disrupting too much. But we are far more erotic as a species than we let ourselves, in many ways, live out. And I think that's awesome. I think it's worth exploring. And I think in many ways, if you do it the right way without shame, it is one of the most healing things of this journey. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of my story. Have a great day.